The ocean was a velvet shroud pulled tight, suffocating the last vestiges of light. Each wave that crashed against the unseen shore was a whispered threat, a cold promise of what lay ahead. Salt spray kissed my face, tasting of fear and adrenaline, a potent cocktail that burned in my throat. The landing craft bucked and groaned, a metal beast impatient to deliver its cargo of trembling men into the maw of darkness. Around me, silhouettes huddled, their faces obscured by helmets and apprehension, each lost in their own private hell, each a fragile island in a sea of dread. My stomach churned, not just from the relentless motion of the boat, but from the weight of the unknown pressing down, a suffocating blanket woven from uncertainty and the chilling possibility of oblivion. My fingers, numb with cold and fear, tightened around the worn stock of my rifle. It was a cold, unfeeling comfort, a metallic extension of my own desperate will to survive. I could feel the frantic thumping of my heart against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing the relentless pounding of the waves. It felt too loud, too exposed, as if it would betray me to the unseen enemy lurking just beyond the reach of the darkness. The air crackled with tension, thick and heavy, a tangible presence that pressed against my skin. Every creak of the landing craft, every whispered prayer, every shallow breath amplified in the suffocating silence, broken only by the relentless roar of the ocean, a constant reminder of our vulnerability, our insignificance in the face of such raw, untamed power. We were moths drawn to a flame, hurtling towards a darkness that promised either glory or annihilation. The only certainty was that nothing would ever be the same again. The memory of sunlight on her hair, the way it turned the strands to spun gold, was a stark contrast to the oppressive blackness that surrounded me. Sarah. Her name was a whispered prayer against the coming storm, a lifeline tethering me to the world I might never see again. I remembered her laughter, bright and infectious, a melody that could chase away the darkest clouds. It echoed in my mind now, a fragile counterpoint to the grim symphony of war. We had met by accident, a chance encounter in a crowded market square, a collision of shoulders and apologies that blossomed into something more. I was clumsy, awkward, a soldier on leave, out of place in the civilian world. She was vibrant, alive, a painter with eyes that saw beauty in the mundane. She saw something in me too, something beyond the uniform and the haunted look that I couldn't quite shake. She saw the boy I used to be, the man I still hoped to become. We spent hours wandering through art galleries, her explaining the nuances of color and form, me listening, captivated not just by her words but by the passion that burned within her. She showed me how to see the world in a different light, how to find beauty even in the darkest corners. She painted my portrait, capturing the flicker of hope in my eyes, a hope that I had almost given up on. That portrait was now tucked safely in my breast pocket, a tangible reminder of what I was fighting for, a promise of a future worth surviving for. It was more than just a painting, it was a piece of her, a piece of home, a beacon in the encroaching darkness, a whispered promise that I would see her again. The thought of her smile, the warmth of her hand in mine, was a shield against the fear, a reason to keep moving forward, even when every instinct screamed at me to turn back. The ramp crashed down. Not gently, not easing into the sand. It slammed, a metallic thunderclap that ripped through the pre-dawn quiet, instantly shattering the illusion of stealth. Machine gun fire erupted from the bunkers, tearing into the night. Tracers painted glowing red lines, crisscrossing the beach, seeking, finding. Men screamed. Not war cries, but screams of pure, unadulterated terror. I scrambled out, rifle clutched tight, the roar of the landing craft still ringing in my ears. The beach was a chaos of sand, water, and flailing limbs. Men were falling, collapsing into the surf, riddled with bullets before they even had a chance to fire back. The air reeked of cordite and salt, a nauseating cocktail of death. I saw Miller, his face contorted in a silent scream, clutch at his stomach before disappearing beneath the waves. He'd been right behind me. Adrenaline surged through me, a cold, brutal wave washing away everything but the instinct to survive. I dropped to the sand, crawling forward, the bullets snapping and whining overhead. I saw Sergeant Davies, his face illuminated by the flickering muzzle flashes, barking orders that were lost in the din. He pointed towards a pillbox, a concrete monstrosity spitting death. "Take that goddamn bunker!" he roared, before being cut down by a machine gun burst. I didn't think, I just reacted. I scrambled to my feet, sprinting towards the pillbox, weaving through the carnage. I saw another soldier fall beside me, his leg a bloody mess. I vaulted over him, the image of his pain etched into my mind. Reaching the relative cover of a knocked-out tank, I took a breath, my lungs burning. The pillbox was still firing, its deadly stream cutting down more men. I pulled a grenade from my belt, yanked the pin with my teeth, and lobbed it towards the opening. The explosion was deafening, a blinding flash that momentarily silenced the machine gun. I charged, adrenaline pumping, my rifle raised. Inside, the scene was horrific. The gunners were slumped over their weapons, their bodies mangled by the grenade. One was still alive, his face a mask of blood and pain. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then fired. The shot echoed in the confined space, the final punctuation mark on their lives. The beach fell silent, save for the moans of the wounded. The sun began to rise, painting the scene in a grotesque light. The sand was stained red, littered with bodies, broken equipment, and the detritus of war. We had taken the beach, but at what cost? I looked around at the carnage, the faces of the dead, the faces of the living, etched with shock and horror. The victory felt hollow, a Pyrrhic triumph bought with the lives of men I had known, laughed with, shared stories with. Men who were now just names on a list. The salt spray stings my face. I'm standing on the beach, the waves lapping at my feet. Not that beach. This is Florida, not Normandy. But the memories are the same. They're always the same. They never fade. The sun is warm on my skin, but I feel cold. The laughter of children playing in the distance is a discordant note, a reminder of a world I can no longer fully inhabit. I close my eyes, and I'm back there. The roar of the guns, the screams of the dying, the smell of blood and cordite. It's a sensory assault, a relentless barrage that never stops. I can feel the sand beneath my hands, the weight of my rifle, the burning in my lungs. I can see Miller's face, contorted in pain, disappearing beneath the waves. I can see the young gunner in the pillbox, his eyes pleading for mercy. They say time heals all wounds. They lie. Time just buries them deeper, layers of experience and regret piled on top. But they're still there, festering beneath the surface, waiting for the slightest trigger to bring them roaring back to life. A sudden noise, a familiar smell, a certain slant of light, anything can open the floodgates. My wife, Sarah, approaches, her face etched with concern. She knows the signs. The faraway look in my eyes, the clenching of my jaw, the subtle tremor in my hands. She doesn't say anything, just takes my hand, her touch a grounding force. She understands, in a way that no one else can. She lives with the ghost of that beach, too. We walk in silence, the waves are only company. I try to focus on the present, on the warmth of her hand, on the beauty of the sunset. But the past is a persistent shadow, always lurking just behind me. It colors everything, tinges every experience with a hint of melancholy. I can never truly escape it. Later, as we sit on the porch, watching the stars come out, I feel a flicker of peace. Sarah leans her head on my shoulder, her presence a comfort. Maybe, just maybe, I can learn to live with the ghosts. Maybe I can find a way to reconcile the man I am today with the boy who stormed that beach so long ago. Maybe. But the fear before dawn, will always be a part of me. The first rays of dawn, a bruised purple bleeding into a fragile gold, kissed the ravaged beach. The smoke began to dissipate, revealing the brutal landscape. Wrecked landing craft lay scattered like broken toys, half submerged in the bloody surf. Bodies, both allied and Axis, were strewn across the sand, grotesque sculptures illuminated by the nascent light. The air hung thick with the acrid stench of cordite, burnt flesh, and the metallic tang of blood. The symphony of gunfire had faded to a sporadic, mournful echo, replaced by the cries of the wounded and the ragged gasps of the dying. Sergeant Miller, his face blackened with soot and streaked with dried blood, knelt beside Private Hayes. Hayes' eyes were wide, unfocused, staring at a point beyond the horizon. His chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths. A crimson stain bloomed on his uniform, spreading like a malevolent flower. Miller gently took Hayes' hand, his own trembling. "Easy, son. Medics are coming." Hayes coughed, a weak, rattling sound. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. "Miller. I saw him." Miller squeezed his hand. "Saw who, Hayes?" "Just rest now." "The Reaper, he was everywhere. Taking them, all of them." Hayes' voice was a barely audible whisper. "He touched me. I felt his cold hand." Miller closed his eyes for a moment, fighting back the wave of despair that threatened to engulf him. He'd seen too much death tonight. Too much fear. Too much senseless waste. He opened his eyes and forced a reassuring smile. "There's no Reaper, Hayes. Just the enemy. And we beat them. We took the beach." Hayes' grip tightened on Miller's hand. "No, it wasn't the Germans. It was something else. Something darker." His eyes flickered, losing focus again. "The fear. Miller, it feeds him. It makes him stronger." Miller glanced around. Other soldiers were beginning to stir, some tending to the wounded, others simply staring blankly ahead, lost in the abyss of their own trauma. He saw Lieutenant Walker, his arm in a makeshift sling, directing a group of men towards a heavily fortified bunker. The lieutenant's face was grim, etched with exhaustion. "Miller." Hayes' voice was weaker now, barely a breath. Tell them it's not over, not just because the shooting stops, the fear, it lingers." Hayes' grip loosened. His eyes glazed over, the light fading from them like a dying ember. His chest stilled. Miller remained kneeling there for a long moment, his hands still clasped in Hayes' lifeless one. The rising sun painted the scene in hues of orange and red, a macabre masterpiece of destruction and sacrifice. He looked out at the ocean, now calm and deceptively serene, the waves lapping gently at the shore, washing away the blood and the debris. But the fear, Hayes was right, the fear lingered. It clung to the air like the smoke, permeating everything. Slowly, Miller rose to his feet. He looked towards the bunker, the objective they had fought so desperately to achieve. It stood silhouetted against the dawn, a dark and ominous shape. He knew that even if they took the bunker, even if they drove the enemy back into the sea, the war would not be over. Not for him. Not for any of them. The war within, the war against the fear, the darkness that Hayes had spoken of, that war would continue to rage long after the guns fell silent. He took a deep breath, the air stinging his lungs. He had a duty to the living, to the men who were still fighting, to the memory of those who had fallen. He had to keep going. He had to keep fighting. Not just for victory, but for hope. For the chance to find some measure of peace in the face of unimaginable horror. He started walking towards the bunker, towards the unknown terrors that still lay ahead, the weight of the world, and the lingering fear, heavy on his shoulders. The sun climbed higher, casting long, distorted shadows across the beach, a silent testament to the long night, and the even longer road that lay ahead. The fear before dawn might be over, but the fear of what comes next, that was only beginning.